Under Silver Birches, an intimate interview, 4th of October 2025, on truth, identity, and writing the Kintsugi Poet.
I've met you as Mirella Di Benedetto, but you've written a book that has both that name and Anna Verduci on the front cover. Can you explain that to me?
Well, Anna was the name I was given by my birth mother, so it's on my real birth certificate. The surname on that is her surname. The Verduci comes from my father, my birth father. When I wrote that, and I've always thought this since I've known I was adopted, it's like, who would I have been had I not been adopted? So it's almost like being two different people. The person that grew up adopted in a stranger's family, and the person who has met her biological family and then understood more of herself through meeting them and thinking, well, what would I have done, achieved, done things differently had I allowed to be my real, authentic biological self.
Which of those names do you identify with today?
Mirella, because that's the one I've known my whole life. To call myself anything else would feel weird.
And do you feel that you are Mirella from beginning to end, or do you feel that there was another being, that you would have been a different person had you been named Anna Verduci?
Yeah, I think so, definitely. And also because the Verduci that name carries a lot. A very infamous name, my father. So yes, definitely, I think I would have been different.
And how do you think that name would have influenced your life and the road travelled?
It depends when I would have come across that name. So had it been in the 80s, 1980, me as a 16-year-old, the last thing I would have wanted was to attract more attention to myself. So I would have shied away from that name. Whereas now, as an adult, 60-year-old, it just doesn't bother me. Because it's like, that's not my life, that was his life. Whereas as a teenager and a young adult, I think I would have carried that stigma and not known how to realise it's not my stigma to carry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would you say to that person that divulged that long-held family secret for 16 years if you had the opportunity to meet up with them again?
I would actually thank him for telling me, but I think the way he did it was not appropriate, because I'm not so sure I would have found out for a long time, because it had been kept a secret for so long anyway, and everyone knew except me. I don't think my adopted mother would ever have told me. Her family probably wouldn't have let anything out, and so I'm glad that I found out the truth. And I believe everyone needs to know the truth.
So do you think he came from a cultural perspective, or was it somebody saying something inappropriate to a young person, just overstepping the mark, just pretty much being a nasty person?
Yeah, he did overstep the mark because he had no idea how I would have reacted to something like that, and I could have reacted very badly. I don't know what his motivation was. Maybe he assumed I knew.
Yeah.
Maybe he was sussing out my reaction. I really can't say. I don't know.
But that story's fleshed out in the book, isn't it?
Him telling me?
Yeah. The story of how you found out.
Yeah, that's
and
in chapter 1.
the circumstances afterwards comes
Yeah.
out. And it all starts from there. It's a really interesting book, how you go through from a girl of 16 to today, but you can also go backwards in the book, read it from the last chapter back to the first chapter. Tell me how that came about.
Because I was playing around with ideas. I wanted to write the best memoir I could. And I think that comes from all my years of study, being an academic, being a high achiever to a degree, that you want to write the best you can. So there was that idea that if I'm only going to write one book in life, I want it to be the best I can do. And so I was playing around with, well, what makes a good literary book? What makes it different? What makes it innovative? And this is one of the things that I came across in terms of the structure of the book. It comes about from my role as a psychologist, because as a psychologist I meet someone and we're starting today, but often I'm digging back. So they come today with some issue and I'm digging back to think, well, where did this thing originate? Let's go back. So when I told the story, I was starting at a particular time point and going forward, but I also could have gone backwards. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really clever. Yeah. And it's such an interesting story. Without giving too much away, you meet the family, but some are happy to meet you and some not so happy to meet you. Where's the status quo now? How do you juggle it so that you can still keep up the connections that you enjoy without treading on toes?
If I can be specific without too many spoilers, but I don't have much to do with my half-siblings on either side, really. And that's disappointing, but that's life. I can't make anyone want to have a relationship with me if they don't want to. To a degree, I understand why they don't want to, and I'll just leave that bit there. I think it's easier to have a relationship with like cousins, aunts, uncles, because they're more removed from my father in particular. And it just makes it easier. They don't have the same emotional investment in their history, in their story. And in terms of treading on toes, well, the paths don't cross, so it's not really an issue, unless maybe I'm at some family gathering like Christmas, but then everyone just, puts on their best behaviour anyway, so it doesn't matter.
That's not your typical family.
Or maybe they're just restrained in front of me, I don't know.
With your relationship now with your father, what does that look like on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month situation? Like, how do you two connect now?
I see him about once a week, once a fortnight, and so we tend to just arrange to meet for lunch. And typically I spend a couple of hours with him, and most of that time it's him doing a lot of the talking, him telling me stories, telling me all sorts of things that he knows about. But I also get an opportunity to ask about him, his family, what it was like for him growing up, because I just love human stories. So I want to know what it was like for him when he was a boy in Italy. What was that life like? What were his grandparents like? What was it like when he came out to Australia in the 50s? In the height of that migration period, in the height of that racism towards Italians in particular. What was it like for him? How did he deal with it?
I want to hear more about how you think your life would have been growing up in that household versus the one that you've grown up in. What are the differences? You now know a lot about your history, your background, what could have been. You've lived a life with what was. So what would you say to somebody that was adopted or potentially had a similar upbringing where there were secrets and they weren't told the truth from the get-go? Was this journey what you expected it to be, or has it grown legs?
It's definitely grown legs. The research says, without getting academic and technical, kids that know the truth do better. And that's why they actually changed the adoption laws.
Better in what way? As in emotionally or
in terms of mental health?
Terms
of mental health.
Okay.
Kids like me who don't know, who grew up in the area of closed adoptions, weren't told that they were adopted. You're more prone to things like depression, anxiety, trauma, all that kind of stuff, drug abuse, compared to kids who have always known. So the truth is better.
What would you tell somebody that was looking for their story? Would you say, go out and find it? What was the longing that you felt inside? What was the self-talk? What was it that made you desperate to go and find your paternal father and your maternal mother besides some stranger on a bus? Because you could have got angry, you could have gone home, exploded, and basically let everything come to the surface, but then after the dust settles, walk away and say, well, I'm living my life, that's it. And I don't want a bar of the adopted family, and I don't want a bar of my maternal paternal family. But you didn't.
It's always individual. So I didn't have a great childhood up until the age of 16.
Why?
Because my adopted father, he was an abusive alcoholic. There was domestic violence. There were secrets. I had to keep so many secrets as a kid. Despite that, I was closer to my dad than my mum. And then he died. And then Mum and I spent 5 years on our own, which were the best 5 years of my childhood. And then this stranger comes along, my stepfather. And that just changed everything for me. Find out I'm adopted at 16.
While this new person was in your mother's life.
Yeah, so 2 years after he had come along. For a young person, I'm putting my psychology hat on here, that's a lot to go through. And then I find out I'm adopted. So I wanted to find out because I just felt different. I was different to my cousins.
In what way? You're a high achiever, you've got a PhD in psychology, you're very talented sporting wise as well. You've done a lot in your life. And you were brought up as an only child, so some might say that you were spoiled and you had opportunities that bigger families and less educated kids may not have had. So you had opportunities. But how were you different to your cousins? What was it within your DNA that made you different from them?
I think the academic side was one of it, because I wasn't pushed to go to finish high school or go to uni. That was absolutely my choice, because I love to learn. I love knowledge. And I didn't want to, as a female, I didn't want to just get married and have kids. That was like the traditional thing that what people, and I thought, no, there's more to life than just that. It's not that I didn't want it at all, but it wasn't a big priority. I just had this curiosity. I'm willing to try stuff that other people don't necessarily do. I think that comes from my father.
Tell me about your father's education and his smarts.
Well, I'm not sure up to what schooling level he did. I think it would have been just primary school, because he would have left school around 12 because he had to go out and help his father. So he was working from the age of 12, and then he came out to Australia, and then he learned a trade. He learned to become an electrician. But then during that time he was self-taught in that he read. He just read heaps about any topic. You could ask him about anything. About physics, about poetry, about cooking, about gardening, just anything, and he will know something about that particular topic. And also he says he's very creative, he can make things. He was an entrepreneur. He was into all sorts of stuff. He had his own business. He was into politics. He was just, I don't know if he's got ADHD, and maybe I have as well, but he's just got one of these people with a massive mind that just absorbs information.
Yeah. So what kind of conversations do you two have now?
It varies. It depends on the day, actually. Sometimes it might be just the mundane, but other times we'll have philosophical conversations about what is the meaning of life. Is there life after death? That kind of stuff.
And what's his response to that? What does he think? What's his most way
No,
out?
he says when we die, the maggots are just going to get into our brains and that's it. There is no heaven, there's no God.
Does that make the book?
Oh, it might have been in there, something like that, yeah.
So how do you see yourself moving forward? One day he's going into the other world. How are you going to feel about that?
Oh, of course I'm going to feel sad. But I've also done a lot of grieving because I found him so late in life. I think about the fact that, because now he's an old man, he won't like me saying that, and what we can do together is very limited, or going away or things like that. Had I met him 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we could have done so much more together, so much more exploring together. So now I just think every day is precious. You make the most of every day.
And it sounds like he's still got a very sharp mind.
Oh, he does.
Yeah, it's
And
amazing.
his memory is amazing. The things he remembers is just incredible.
Do any shock you?
Oh, yes. There's plenty of book I would like to write but can't.
Do you envisage road trips with him? These long chats, how long do they go for? And how many days could you bear to be in his company to just talk?
I don't have a problem talking to him, but it's just my nature that after a certain amount of time, I need me time. So it doesn't matter who that is.
Sounds
Yeah.
like an only child syndrome.
Yeah, and being a bit introverted, eventually I just need me time.
And is he like that at all?
I think he is. I think he likes his own company. Like, as much as he likes to talk, I think he's happy with his own company.
Yeah.
So I think he does have a bit of I would say he is an introvert, more introverted than extrovert.
And you have described him as eccentric at times. What are the most peculiar aspects that you find endearing?
Well, I don't know if I find it endearing, but he thinks he knows everything about everything. In that regard, I think he's a typical Calabrian male.
You've just lost that, you've just lost that lot
of that
bias
generation.
in
Sorry to all those guys, but it's true. He does a bit of mansplaining. The ladies will understand. I just let it slide.
How has writing this book changed your life?
It gave me closure on that story. While I wrote it, it was very cathartic. It was very difficult to write certain parts of that story.
Which part?
My early life, my adopted mother's death, and that's still, every time I read that chapter, I'm in tears. That was the hardest one. That was the hardest chapter to write. The later chapters where it made me reflect on what I've lost in terms of finding my family so late in life. But ultimately, whatever life throws us, we just have to be grateful for what we've got. And none of us know how long we're going to be here. And you just got to make the most of every day. So if there's something you want to do, go and do it. And you asked me an earlier question about would I encourage people to search. If that's what they want to do, then yes, do it. But it's not for everyone. Not everyone has a need to know, and that's okay. And hopefully, I won't say it's changed my life greatly in this way yet, but I've discovered that I just love writing, and it's just something that I want to keep doing.
So while you've been promoting your book and you've got some traction online, people have reached out to you, and what seems to be a consistent thread in what people have had to say?
It resonates for people differently dependent on their own story. And I think that's what books do. They make us stop and think and reflect. And this type of book in particular, it makes us think about our own journey. And I guess that's what I also wanted from the book, to get people, and also as a psychologist, because I also see it as, because I could have written a self-help book, but I thought, there's enough of those out there, but how can I do this through telling my own story?
Yeah, I think if people can relate to one point in the book, whatever that point is, it sucks them into the rest of it. And it's just such a beautiful book in that you've touched on so many things. There's grief, there's happiness, there's finding oneself, there's finding people, actual people that you didn't know existed for so long, being welcomed, being shunned, stories and lives of other people that you just wouldn't imagine. The links to the Calabrian Mafia, the 'Ndrangheta. There's something there for everybody. Did you realise that when you were writing it, or it was more about this is my story?
I knew there were different themes because when I was writing the story, I was doing research on how do you write a memoir.
Okay.
And you're supposed to stick to a theme. And how would I summarise my book in one sentence? I thought, I can't do that. It's impossible. It's impossible. I can't because there's lots of different things. And that's just because that's what my life was. I can't write it differently, I wouldn't be true to myself. I wouldn't be telling my story.
So
And my story has had so many ups and downs and twists and turns that that's just the story.
So we've heard a lot about the underbelly of the 80s on, but is this a story of the underbelly from the 60s and 70s? A cultural one. This is the Italian underbelly that came to Australia, and then what was going on in Carlton back in the 60s
It's probably part of that story.
in Melbourne.
Yeah. That story is certainly much bigger than what the little bit I've told.
Would you be open to a mini series being made of this book?
Oh,
And your
I would love it. My father would love it. He would absolutely love it. A few other people would not.
It wasn't enough to be made infamous through the Winchester case.
No, I think he likes the idea of being immortal in that way.
And yet, what is his relationship like with his other siblings that are still alive?
Oh, look, I don't think I should answer that one. I might get myself into trouble.